The easy entry points is where things start to feel a little bit lower effort or a little bit more hands off. A newsletter, a podcast, you can set some of those things up to work on your behalf. You're still going to be participating in them in some way, but you can, for example, batch a bunch of episodes and then take 6 months off. Or you can use automations with newsletters. Welcome to the 50th episode of Low Energy Leads, the show that's all about stepping off the marketing treadmill so you can do more of what you actually like to do. Today's episode is about what the name of the show means. What is a low energy lead? What do I mean by low energy leads? What do you mean by this? Cut the jargon, just tell us how to get clients, Lex. Today I'm going to explain what I think low energy leads means, the origin of this show, and sort of what's behind it. We're going to talk about what a low energy lead system might look like. I'm going to break that down for you. And so if you're stuck, you're feeling like, I don't know how to get clients, or I don't understand what part of my system's not working, this is the episode for you. I'm Lex Roman, and I empower creatives to make marketing bets they can win. And you already know you're tuned in to the Low Energy Leads show. Okay, so what are low energy leads? Why this show name? The origin of this show came from discovery calls. I would talk with clients about their marketing efforts and they didn't understand why some things weren't paying off and other things felt like so much effort. And I started to present this idea of low effort, high impact, which will sound familiar to a lot of you who've worked in bigger organizations. The idea of prioritization with low effort, high impact work. I started to frame it as lower energy leads. And I noticed that prospective clients were really sparking to that phrase. It resonated with them and it started to help me sell my program, growth trackers, and some of my one-off packages. This insight, this attunement, we'll say, to what my clients were facing came from my own story, where I noticed that I was playing hard, complicated marketing games. Y'all have heard me talk about this on this show, and definitely if you've come to one of my trainings, when I used to go door to door in my neighborhood, when I was doing direct mail, running Facebook ads long before I should have, I knew I was going to lose these games. And I could have been choosing easier routes based on what I already knew, my skills, and most importantly, who I knew. The audience that I had built trust with that I was ignoring. Low energy leads is so named also because I have a chronic illness and I'm tired a lot and I can't spend hours and hours working on my business. I sort of have a daily expiration or even a weekly expiration of how much time I can put into this. And many of you have similar constraints, whether you have a chronic illness like me, a disability, kids, parents that you're caring for. There's a lot of reasons why we need to be much smarter and more efficient with how we spend our time. I took to my LinkedIn and I asked what you thought low energy leads means. What's a low energy lead? I asked. Tom Kerwin, who's the author of Innovation Tactics, said that low energy leads and low energy lead are different to him. A low energy lead sounds like someone who's just exhausted. And low energy leads sounds like lead generation without the massive effort and hustle. Max Pete, who's a community expert, says to him it means things are coming naturally in due time without force. Pame Barba, who helps leaders and orgs increase their impact, says, when I'm on vacation and a client comes in through a referral, especially when they're pretty convinced they need to work with me. Jeremy Miller, who's a UX designer and the host of Beyond UX Design podcast, says that he always thought of it as more passive leads, or at the very least, less active chasing of leads, sort of setting your funnel up so leads can come to you. To me, low energy leads, this show and this concept is about finding your lowest effort path to high value leads. Now, I sort of think that this idea of setting your funnel up, so to speak, or passive income is a little bit of a myth. Like, I've never known a business owner to do that. Do I know business owners that have things that are more dialed in than others? Absolutely. And I do think that there are some parts of your system that you can tweak and get to a place where they're performing without you actively having to do every single part of that system. But for many of us, things change in the industry, buyer demand changes, technology changes. Like, there's not a lot of businesses that you just year after year can sort of cook without your participation. So to me, the goal is not to be asleep and taking a nap or on the beach with a Mai Tai. To me, the goal is to lower your effort over time. It's to look month over month and to say, did I lower my effort? Am I more clear this month on what's going to bring me value? Do I have an increasing pile of things that are working and a decreasing pile of uncertainty? To me, it's about lowering your effort to finding that value. It's about finding those things where the payback is better than your effort, right? Where it's worth the effort because the payback is so good. I want to take a beat here to acknowledge that we have a lot of peers among us in the small business and creator communities that are just not that aware of how their business is functioning. And so if you're talking to your peers or in communities, you're listening to other podcasts and people are like, oh, I just blah, blah, blah. And then step 3, profit. Some people are just not that aware of what they're doing. They're not that aware of the ingredients that are working in their favor. One of my biggest pet peeves is people saying, oh, my business is all word of mouth. And it's like, yeah, word of mouth comes from a series of activities, behaviors, and channels that you have set up in your life. To me, that's like a shallow take on where clients are coming from, where lead generation is actually coming from. So for those of us realists in the room, let's talk about the lead gen system that is low energy, right? What's the low energy lead gen system look like? The recipe is this: 2 parts relationships, 1 part delivering value, 1 part easy entry points. Just want to give you some guardrails, and I also want you to know that it's okay to go off the rails. Any of you who have spent time with me know that I also talk about the growth model. That's the center of my method inside Growth Trackers, my marketing experimentation program. I'm going to link to that as well, but I wanted to explain this in a new way. These are overlapping methods, but today's take is a little bit different. And so for any of you who have been like, I don't really relate to the growth model, I'm hoping that today is helpful, insightful for you. Let's look at this recipe in detail. You've got relationships. This is the center of any business. It doesn't matter the size. It doesn't matter whether you're B2B or B2C. Even B2C businesses are often building strategic relationships with partners. When I worked with the Black Tux, which is a nationwide distributor of tuxedos and suits, we had direct relationships with our buyers. We also had key relationships with businesses like Nordstrom and The Knot, which allowed us access to our customers in bulk. So relationships are the center of all of our businesses. A lot of times we try to skip this step. There's relationships that play in every part of your business. Obviously, you have client relationships. But before you have clients, or if you're validating a new offer, you've got your broader network of people that you've been pouring into, as Christina Bartold would say, people that you've banked trust with, right? Who you went to college with, who you go to the gym with, people at your kids' school, people that you worked with at a job a couple jobs ago, people that you've known from the internet for years who keep following you wherever you go. There are people surrounding you, and every person that you know knows other people. And they are all avenues to the things that you want to do and the people that you want to meet. So relationships are key. If you've got quite a buzzing business, your clients become the center of that. But if you don't, you're going to want to work those other relationships. Other relationships that will come up here are partners, co-promoters, supporters, fans. There's different types of ways that people can engage with your business. And it's not just about getting to your end client, right? You can think about how people will forward an email on your behalf, how people will boost something that you post, how people will invite someone to your webinar. So relationships, 50% of your lead gen system, at least 50% of your lead gen system. The second thing is delivering value, which is also known as being fucking good at your job. Like, you have to be really good at what you do. You have to be delivering a high value service in a high value way. You have to treat people well. You have to be unique and different, right? This is a tall bar to clear, and you'll know you're clearing it because once you've had an engagement with someone, once you finished a project or someone has bought something from you, they can't stop raving about it, right? They want to come back. They give you high marks. They are referring people your way. This is why we focus so much on referrals and amplification, because it's a good sign that you are delivering this value. And that is table stakes in any lead gen system. We cannot send leads to a valueless system. That is called a scam. That's Billy McFarland at Fire Festival, right? That's leads to a scam. The value part is the key. We don't talk about this a lot on this show because I just don't think that this is your problem. But if you find that you're delivering projects or people are buying stuff and they're not telling you they loved it or telling others they loved it, it's something to look at, whether or not the value that you're providing is actually a sustainable business. Because this part is how you step off the marketing treadmill, right? The thing that you're providing is so good that the relationships you're pouring into are turning out tenfold on the other side. These people are telling others about you. They're telling people about your newsletter. They're telling people about your LinkedIn. They're telling people about you. And that brings us to the third part of this recipe, the easy entry points. So referrals don't have to come sliding into third base. Referrals can also go to your newsletter, your podcast, your social media, events that you're at, events that you're hosting, places that you're hanging out, like communities. Easy entry points are places where people will get to know you. They'll get to know how you're thinking. They'll get to know the thing that you offer. This is a thing where most of us burn ourselves out. We spend a lot of our effort here, but this is actually like a very small part of your recipe, right? It's 25%, if that. And actually, you can totally run a business without this. I've seen many people do it for years. I put this in here though because it can be a way that your lead generation can become slightly more passive. Otherwise, you are working your relationships quite a bit. The easy entry points is where things start to feel a little bit lower effort or a little bit more hands off. A newsletter, a podcast, you can set some of those things up to work on your behalf. You're still going to be participating in them in some way, but you can, for example, batch a bunch of episodes and then take 6 months off. Or you can use automations with newsletters. When it comes to events, you could show up to events a handful of times a year, maybe even less, and still drive value from that. Have you ever caught yourself giving out your website with a side of, please don't judge my site, it's on my eternal to-do list? Imagine directing someone to your site, and instead of bracing for their reaction, you're beaming with pride. Picture your website not just as a digital space, but as your round-the-clock, cape-wearing superhero helping your business grow while you take a nap. Stacey Nichols with Space Cookie Designs is all about elevating your online presence from oops, still working on it to oh wow, you have to see my site. Learn more at thespacecookie.com. So to recap this recipe, we've got 2 parts relationships, 1 part delivering value, and 1 part easy entry points. So you can kind of see, hopefully, visualize how this cycles into lead generation. You're meeting people, they're telling people about you through your easy entry points, they're having an excellent experience, and then those people are starting at step 1, right? That is the cycle of growth for your business. If you don't see that happening, then one of those things is broken or suboptimal. One of those things is not working great. If your relationships aren't turning into leads, then you're wrong about who your target is, or you're incorrectly pitching it to them. People don't understand it, or you're not being specific about how you're asking for introductions for the kind of people that you want to meet. If you're in validation mode for your offer, relationships should be the main thing that you're doing. Steve Blank, venture capitalist to the stars, is the creator of something called customer development, and his catchphrase was, get out of the building. I used to do this with my clients in San Francisco. We would literally go out in the city of San Francisco and try to talk to people. I did this with the team at Macy's. Macy's had a store in Union Square in San Francisco. We would go out and we would talk to people coming out of the store. I used to set up at Starbucks, or I would set up at a gas station, and I would ask people if they had this experience that I was trying to validate a product around. So you're going to do that with people that you know. Hey, do you know anybody who works in HR? Hey, do you know anybody who is a teacher? And you're going to just beat that drum until you get to an answer. And if you get no and no and no over and over again, you might be wrong about your audience, or you might be asking the wrong people in the wrong way. You got to be self-aware and smart about this. But Instagram posts into the abyss, Google blog posts into the abyss, like those aren't going to bring people in anytime soon. If you are closing projects or you're selling products and those people aren't telling you anything about their experience, or they're not coming back, or they're not telling others, then you have a value problem to solve, right? Your service isn't quite there. And that's an opportunity to get their feedback, their input, or to get some beta testers through if you're doing something new, and to figure out what's broken about it. Why isn't it newsworthy? Why isn't it generating word of mouth for you? And then with your easy entry points, if people aren't coming on to those, or they're not converting off of those, then usually that's a messaging problem, because people have, shown that they're interested, or they've been introduced through someone else, and then they're dead ending because your messaging isn't quite dialed in. So if you have a problem in one of your content forums, so newsletter, social media, podcasts, where there's people there, but there's like not engaging, that's pretty much always a messaging problem, especially if your relationships are dialed in. So these are the plates you have spinning. You're delivering a lot of value for your clients, you're honing your relationships, growing that base, and you're providing an easy entry point to getting to know you. I've been calling this a hangout space, right? Where are people hanging out, get to know how you think, to see what you offer, to learn whether or not they want to work with you, or even whether or not they trust you to buy something from you. If you want things to be passive, you have to dial these systems in. And things like relationships have to become a little bit more systematized. You have to think about, well, how am I going to keep up with people? I saw someone the the other day who got laid off, sadly, and then came to LinkedIn and was like, I just got laid off. I'm looking for a new job. Would love to catch up with everybody. And it's like it's a little bit late. You're going to have to dial in your process around how you deliver value to your clients. And then when it comes to your entry points, that's like dialing in things like your newsletter automations, dialing in your social media content system, dialing in your podcast production, dialing in your event strategy. So those are things that can become less effort, right? They can become less energy over time. I don't want to say passive because I just don't really believe that any of these things ever become passive in our ever-changing world, but they will become lower energy. I don't want to leave things too abstract, so I want to give you 3 scenarios of low energy lead gen systems based on some real small business owners that I know. The first one is a web designer who is a boutique agency. So with this recipe, I'm going to walk through this recipe for each of these folks. The relationship part is coming from past colleagues, right? This person has been a professional designer for years, so people know them as a designer. That's a huge asset. They're staying up with those folks on LinkedIn, so that's a stay in touch strategy for them. Not necessarily a stranger visibility channel, but it kind of doubles as both, right? Because the past colleagues will comment, prompting strangers to see this person's information. They're also in a couple of communities where they keep up with the peers and other creatives. So they're networking with people and building stronger relationships with people. This is especially strategic for people on the fringe, right? It's like, oh, I kind of know you do that thing, but in this community, you're learning about this person because they're posting about their expertise. They're responding to questions about their expertise. And then they also attend some events and conferences, which are relationship builders. In their industry of web design, this is a common thing to see people at conferences year after year. And so that's a way that they keep up with their relationships. In terms of the value, they have a dialed in process. They run a subscription web design business. So the dialed in process really makes sure that there's quality control for their clients. There's an expectation of what's going to be delivered because it's very clearly presented. They have a depth of expertise in a very popular technology that is not a DIY web platform. Plus they bring a bonus expertise about conversion and sales, which is very hard to match in their profession. When it comes to their entry points, they're part of a designer marketplace. They use Twitter to champion the things that they're doing. So they're talking about their work a lot on Twitter and showing it off on Twitter, which is a great place for referrals to come see what they're doing. And then they have a side project that relates to web design. So it's something that is word of mouth worthy, it's referral worthy, that is about web design. And if someone is looking at that, then they might want to know who's behind it and talk to this web designer. As far as I know, this person doesn't have a newsletter or community. So I would consider this to be a fairly low energy system. They've got relationships working for them at a few events, through LinkedIn, through communities that they're participating in. This could be, we could be talking here about a once a month commitment to that kind of stuff. The side project is something that has very low upkeep or could be kind of a one and done thing. And then they're a little bit active on Twitter. So this is a pretty low energy system. Like you could even cut this down and make it lower energy, especially depending on your price point. The second business owner I want to walk you through is a copywriter and content creator. Content creator is a key ad here. The relationship part of their lead gen system includes their own community. So they have an advantage there because that is a platform that they own. It is both a value proposition and a way to stay up with their audience, right? They're staying in touch with people through their own community. They also have lots of past colleagues that are relevant contributors to this business, whether it's amplification of things that they're posting or referrals for work or referrals to the community. They have a past client book, and then also they're in a couple communities as well. Communities is definitely a theme for service providers, finding the right communities where you're sort of building these relationships before you need them. And then when it comes to the value that they're delivering, because they're a writer who also creates content, they're displaying that value prop all the time through all of their different channels. And they're adding other monetization with that. They've got a newsletter, a blog, and social, offloading some of their sales labor to content marketing in this case. Is it more energy for you to write a blog post, or is it more energy for you to get on the phone with someone? Everyone's going to have a different answer to that. So you have to think about what low energy means in your life. The entry points to this person's business. So if I'm referring someone their way, Eventbrite, because they're hosting community events, LinkedIn, newsletter, and podcast. Now, again, this is a lot of different entry points. You don't necessarily need 5 entry points, but I would challenge you to think about all your entry points because right now I'm sort of willing to bet that you have more than 5. Many of us are trying to run multiple communities, multiple social medias, a newsletter, a podcast, events. We're trying to network. So I would just say that 5 is lower than what a lot of people are doing. And again, you could cut that down even further. You could say, okay, I've got my own community. So what's the minimum channels that I've got in there? Maybe I've got referrals coming out of that community and guest referrals could potentially be enough to sustain that community. And you would want to validate that piece by piece, right? Can I get the community bringing in all of the new members I need? No? What do I add? Rather than saying, I'm going to operate a big company playbook, I'm going to do it all, and then have no idea what's working or why these things aren't working the way that I expect them to. The last business owner is a marketing consultant. They're a solo consultant, sort of a fractional CMO type. They focus a ton on their relationships, and I'm willing to bet that they really value and enjoy that part of their business. So they spend a lot of time in freelancer networks, which can both be in communities, but they also find them on social media. There's quite a freelancer community on both Twitter and LinkedIn. They're also really good at staying in touch with past clients. They've been building their business for years, so they spend a lot of time emailing and checking in with past clients. The value they deliver is that they're an expert at what they do and they save their clients money because they help them make the right bets. And their entry points are Twitter and LinkedIn, more LinkedIn these days than Twitter, communities run by others they're an expert in and a participant in, and then their own newsletter. So what we're looking at here across these three businesses is an emphasis on relationship building and continuing those relationships, right? Not just saying hi and bye, but how are we going to continue to stay in each other's orbits, whether it's your clients, your peers, your partners, your collaborators, a really solid value proposition that is fully delivered in what you do, and 3 to 5 entry points. In your case, you can absolutely start with one entry point. You can get away with one. We heard from Jeff White a couple episodes ago about how LinkedIn being his only channel. You can have a single entry point if you want to. Now, there's a risk of that, which is that if something changed about LinkedIn, then you're sort of like out your source. I do think there's an advantage to playing with this and having at least 1 or 2 other ones that you could lean harder into if the one that you prefer stops working the way you expect it to. I would be really curious to hear if you see a path to lower energy leads that doesn't include what I laid out. The 2 parts relationship, 1 part value, 1 part entry points. I'd be really curious if you see a way to even lower the energy on that system. I'm open to it. I'd love to hear about it. I haven't seen it, but I would love to. Speaking of low energy, I'm feeling high energy on a couple other projects I have cooking, so I'm gonna put this show on ice starting April 24th. I might come back. I'm treating it as a hiatus for until at least the summer, and we'll see. Maybe we'll come back with fresh eyes, maybe we won't. We're gonna see where the spring takes us. It is sincerely a pleasure to make this show, and I'm super grateful for all of you who take the time to tell me or to tell Apple Podcasts how much you like the show, but it's a lot of work for the least payoff among all my projects. I will keep doing the newsletter, the Low Energy Leads newsletter, and I will probably think about running some events there for us. So make sure you're on the newsletter, read.lowenergyleads.com. So that means we have 2 episodes left before this hiatus. I haven't selected the topics yet, and I'd be curious to hear what you're interested in. I'm thinking that one needs to be about word of mouth, but the other one is up for grabs. Let me know what you'd be interested in. Send me a note on lowenergyleads.com. Until next time, keep your energy low until you know the value will be high.